Good morning. I'm sorry that we had a little delay in starting today, but we would like to thank you all for being here to help us to celebrate our third annual College of Education's Educators Summit. The goal of today's conference is to provide alumni, in-service, pre-service, teachers, educational leaders, and community members with the opportunity to deepen their content and pedagogical knowledge, demonstrate how to integrate technology into their coursework, and examine models of leadership for promoting teacher effectiveness and student success. During today's sessions, you will learn how courageous educators, students, and caring communities are pulling together to tackle tough educational challenges. They will show what it means to provide all children with a strong future because of a bright beginning. In today's knowledge-based, globally competitive economy, a world-class education must start with expanding access to quality learning for all students. It continues with holding ourselves, educators, future educators, to higher standards so that our students can compete in higher arenas. The challenges to providing a world-class education today are very real. We must face that. The challenges are very urgent. We must respond to those. Yet for every challenge, there are schools, communities, and visionary leaders who are pulling together to meet those challenges. Many of those are in this very same room today. Tragically, too many of our children are not getting a strong start in life, which often means they will not have a strong start in school. They will not begin our schools ready to learn. To this end, schools and local communities must all invest in education. Education is everybody's business. Each community and school leader must not just adhere to what's in their job description. They must commit themselves. They must perform every day because they care about the future of children. Successful solutions and effective innovation for educational partnerships and solutions to educational inequalities must not start somewhere else. They must begin with us. No one knows better than us what our needs are. No one knows better than us what our students' challenges are. We cannot wait for others to give us the answers. We must provide the answers for ourselves. However, those answers that come from us must entail setting standards high, and expectations for students must be set high as well. Standards for students coupled with real support from administrators, teachers, parents, and community leaders must be also included. While successful innovations in education originate at the local level, they flourish in partnerships with nonprofits, community and faith-based organizations, and the state and federal government. This is a shared responsibility. No one gets to opt out. Tough problems like turning around low-performing schools require collaborative, comprehensive solutions that challenge the status quo head-on. There is nothing simple about this work that we must do. Tough challenges force people out of the traditional boxes. They force us to move beyond silos. We have to push beyond our comfort zones. That takes courage and a commitment to doing what's right, not just doing what's easy. In the end, it takes a community to provide a well-rounded, world-class education. It takes outstanding principals, great teachers, high-quality preschool, after-school tutoring, arts, sports programs, healthcare providers, and accessible community recreation centers. It takes committed parents, business, nonprofit, and faith-based leaders, all working together on behalf of children. And by the same token, it is true that no community can succeed without the school being at the center. Schools should be at the heart of community life, whether a public school, private school, charter school, or institution of higher education. The single purest path and surest step out of poverty to success is still and will always be a high-quality education. So, educators who have gathered here today, as you head back to your administrative offices, college classrooms, school classes, or community agencies, I am optimistic about our capacity to elevate and strengthen education in Southwest Georgia, the state, the nation, and indeed the world. Despite the serious challenges we face every day, I am optimistic. I'm optimistic because I know the great school leaders and teachers who are here today. I know the engaged pre-service teachers and committed community leaders who are here today. I am optimistic because I know the great faculty and staff of this institution, the great consultants and leaders of their institutions who are gathered here today are committed to this challenge. I'm optimistic because I have seen students with great challenges still keep their passion for education, who simply will not be denied, whether in the public schools, pre-K through 12th grade, or whether here at Albany State University. They will not be denied a quality education. Therefore, we have to face the challenge to provide that to them. Whether it's a 4-year-old in Albany State's Early Learning Center, a middle school in the Dougherty County Early College, local P through 12 students, or ASU's tenacious candidates, we have to rise to meet the challenges, to face those desires and needs for education that those students have. W.E.B. Du Bois said, "Of all the civil rights for which the world has struggled and fought for 5,000 years, the right to learn is undoubtedly the most fundamental." I absolutely agree. And my fervent wish for every student is that they embrace and enjoy the right to learn this school year and beyond, but more importantly, that we embrace the challenge to provide them with that quality education today and beyond. This morning, Dr. Lemuel Watson, Dean and Professor at the University of South Carolina's College of Education, will be our featured speaker for this morning's address. Additionally, Dr. Keith Wilson, Dean and Professor at Southern Illinois University College of Education and Human Services, will also be presenting throughout this morning's strands. He will engage educational leaders throughout a coaching strand. Today's sessions are very informative. They have been designed to provide pre-service teachers, our candidates who are here engaging to become teachers, educational leaders, counselors, and beyond, with that foundation which you must rely upon as you move throughout your educational preparation, so that you will gather the tools necessary to provide students with the educational foundation that they will need to one day move beyond as well. On behalf of the College of Education, I'm Dr. Kimberly Fields, and I serve as the interim dean, and I am so grateful that you chose to spend your morning with us to learn about a very, very important topic in Southwest Georgia, the future of education for our students. We will begin with Dr. Watson's address, which we hope will stimulate conversations about how varied community stakeholders, you who are in this room, can best support and strengthen P through 16 schools. Thank you very much.
I just want to begin with the fact that I am born and bred in South Carolina, Upper South Carolina, next to the North Carolina state line. I consider myself a country boy, a Southern boy, and country with a K. And I say that because I know what it means to be from a rural area and to be involved in family and friends and to know what it takes in order to dream from a small school in a small community. And I always tell folk, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And I also want to take a moment to say that this is my first time in Albany, Georgia. And I am very much impressed with the community, with Albany State, with the students and faculty. And I find it very refreshing and very uplifting with your hospitality. I think you top South Carolina on that. The other thing I would like to say to Dr. Fields is thanks for having a vision to bring this topic to fruition here, and to Dr. Rollins, who have graciously picked us up and taken us around. It takes a lot to pull off a conference like this, and I want you to realize how important it is to get K-12 and higher ed folk together. This is not happening in all communities, so this is very special. The topic of the conference is leadership, a role for all educators. I think we need to pause and also think about this, because I like to tell my faculty and staff that we are social engineers. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is I'm not just a College of Education dean. I see myself as an ambassador for the university to talk about education, education in a broad sense. I'm here today because I care for the health of our families and our communities and our children. And so as teachers, you do so much more than deliver the content in your classes. You work with students on personal development. You work with families in indirect ways when that child goes home and has to deal with issues, both personal and academic. And so you indeed are social engineers making our society better in various ways. And so I want to thank you this morning for caring enough to be here at 9 o'clock on a Saturday. I know it's early, and I want you to understand how difficult my job is to make sure you're engaged this morning as we begin to move ahead. One of the things that I want to also bring attention to before I begin is the fact that this work is about the humanistic ideas, the humanistic very personal work that we do as humans and as caregivers. And we can't do this job in an effective way without love and care for our students and for our communities. I know that because we can train teachers and principals and superintendents to pass tests, to get standards right, but if they're not really invested in the community and those children, the children know it. How many of you have teachers that you remember who cared deeply for you? Raise your hand. How many of you had teachers that you knew could care less about you? Raise your hand. So you see, it's not that complicated with our children. They know. And we need to put the main thing back in the main thing. Can I get an amen from somebody this morning? Amen. Thank you. So we can't be quiet in here. We're going to have to put the spirit back in education and not be afraid to put the love back in education, because I think that's what's missing. But I also am reminded that I can't be the savior of the world. And so my motto from a Janice Stanfield song is that I cannot do all the good the world needs, but the world needs all the good that I can do. And I think that's an important thing to remember. We can't do all the good the world needs, but all the good that you can do, we're willing to take it. And you start from where you are and make that better. So let me talk to you a little bit and with you, and please feel free. This audience is appropriate for question and answers. Anytime you have a question, raise your hand and I will address it. This should be for you, about you, in order to make you better. And so that's my intent here, to give you something for the head and the heart that you can walk away with. We're talking about collaboration this morning, and some of the basic things with collaboration is that education are bringing together key players who provide the necessary services to families that need to be had. Collaboration is difficult. Collaboration is not always easy. It means giving of yourself and compromising. So we have to remember that if we're going to truly look at a system and make it better. So the purpose of my talk is to give you some ideas about how to collaborate, what it will look like, and some of the challenges, not only at the K-20, P-20 level, but also for our students on campus. Is that okay? Good. John Goodlad is one person that talked about education and said that, schools are not in isolation. They're not in vacuums. For example, I constantly get, when I'm out working with businesses and others, people say, what are you doing with those teachers? What are y'all going to do? Why can't you fix education? And my response is, do you realize that education is a social construct? It involves parents, it involves economics, it involves social services, it involves a number of things where people need to come together. And so if we're going to address schooling, learning, we're going to have to do it in a very different way. So currently, what you have in our system is here on your left, which are, you go through the school, which goes through the state, which goes through the federal government for changes. And the way that you do that are through proposals and policies. My recommendation is on the right, where you deal with working in teams and you look at what's important in your communities and you ask for specific permission from your state in order to do that. In other words, we talk about scalability. And I'm not for scalability because Georgia is very different with very different regions. South Carolina is very different from the Appalachian Mountains to the Sea Pine Islands to the Midlands. And so what will work in one area may not work in another. And in education, we've gone for too long trying to scale everything. Well, we need to look at unique communities and working groups to make things happen there. So how do you know collaboration is right for you? Many people want to talk about collaboration and want to know what's right for you. But one of the things you have to do, I think you have to be intentional with collaboration. You really have to ask yourself, do I need help? Most of us these days will say, yes, we certainly need help. The other one is there someone there to help? And if not, where do you find those folk to help? The other is, will they help if I ask? Is it worth the effort? Again, collaboration takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. And the last is, can I make use of the help when it is provided? Is very important. What these questions underscore as teachers who want to partner with parents and bring people into the classroom, as principals who partnering with schools, higher education and K-12 and businesses all working together, they have to be some common interests in how you move forward. Again, each organization has something to gain. People come to the table with what's good for me. Also, it takes time and resources. Someone will have to be in charge of the collaborations. And to what end are you trying to achieve here? The other thing that's very important, we want to pretend that we can just call a meeting and we'll collaborate, but individuals need to be prepared for this particular work. You're not trained in a way to collaborate. We need to be retooled on what that means if you're going to collaborate with someone, knowing what your organization stands for, what you stand for, and merging various cultures. So you have your own internal organization. You have the external readiness that you need to prep and get people in tune to what they need to be doing for working together. Federal and state agencies, you need to let them know when you're going to do something creative. School districts, school boards. And as you know, sometimes with school boards, you can be as innovative as you want to be. But if the school board isn't approving of that, then you have a challenge. So even with training school board members, you have to think of ways to have them get ready for change. Legislators and other officials, so on and so forth. The next thing is personal readiness. Are you ready to deal with multiple personalities and people for the good of your children? So what is your responsibility in this collaboration? Understanding that there will be critics. Anytime you step out to do something different, you're going to have critics. Start small and build a vision is very important. And also, I think you need to also alert the public about what you're doing as it relates to your partnerships. Now, what would this look like? I try to do visuals so that people can understand what things look like when they get together. What we've done in South Carolina, we have created something called the New Carolina, Transform South Carolina in our schools, and we brought together all of the constituents that you see here on the screen. And this is important because this is a grassroots movement starting with some of the businesses, because they felt that some of our students were not ready for the workforce. And so if you're a student in here, one of the things you may ask yourself, are you ready for the workforce, be it education or business? And so you have to think about this in a different way, a very different way. And what you have here before you is that we're used to working in silos. For example, you're used to working in K-12 and not higher ed. So coming together to have this discussion is important. It needs to be interdisciplinary. It needs to be not only just education pedagogy, but it needs to be content, it needs to be reading, you need some creativity, those kinds of things in order to transform what we look at in higher education, K-12, so on and so forth. And it needs to be a two-way partnership between people coming to the table to learn from each other. You're coming as learners as well as experts. This integration approach, I think, is revolutionary. Why? Because you come to the table as problem solvers. You learn to work with communities and students as co-learners. And so you don't come to the table as an expert necessarily. You come to look at the problem and to move forward. What we mean by engagement. This is a unique issue that many institutions are dealing with. Many institutions are looking to get the Carnegie classification of engagement, and is prestigious to universities. Most of you all that I understand are very much engaged in your community already, and this has to be a mutual beneficial exchange of resources. Both teams have to win. Everybody in the group has to win for the sake of the community and for the educational outcomes. It involves a regional-wide approach. You have something in Albany now where you have multiple institutions and businesses working together. I think that's a great start, and you just need to continue to build on that. The next is what the Carnegie classification has here. They describe the collaboration between higher education and the larger community as something that is powerful to exchange knowledge as well as resources. And next is the national context that you need to consider as you look at education and engagement. And finally, for scholarship, what do we mean by that with students and faculty? I will share this PowerPoint with you, so don't feel a need to take everything. I can share it with you. The quality of a university programs, the value of school-university partners is important, and what you learn is really important. But really, for me, this slide is the next important thing to me. With colleges of education, we're getting beat upon all the time to be different, to do things differently. For example, this presentation has been pretty dry once I started from my opening, right? 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 Right. So we need to get out of doing education that way. But I had to share some things with you. And we need to be more engaging as educators. We need to really retool the classroom. If we're going to have interactive sessions and working together, we need to do that in a way that we're all engaged with making things better. If you had to design a classroom today to totally redesign your educational experience, what would the College of Education look like, and how would they be training you all for the schools that they have to go into? Are the schools ready for total transformation? How many schools are out there that are totally operating without walls, without developmental models, in order to meet the unique needs of our students? Can you think of any school in the area? Any of you, can you think of any school that's doing that now? There's no first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade. Students come in, they get their individual plan, They move in and out of subjects when they need to, using the device they need, and they move on. Graduate in 7 or 8 years and younger, they do it. How many of you know schools that are working that way? Why not? Why aren't we working that way? You know why? Why aren't we working that way? What about here at Albany State? Why do we have to have semesters, 16 weeks? If you can master your material and move on within 4 weeks with various subjects, why can't you do that? Why won't you do that? Wouldn't that be a better educational way? Anybody awake? So why aren't we doing that, guys? Why do we continue to be lockstep in doing the same thing the same old way? What do we need in order to transform our classroom and our colleges? More collaboration, discussion, and talking. First of all, when we began to get together to talk about this, what happens when you get a group together to say, we're going to create the kind of college of education, I want to do this at my own institution, where we're not lockstepping into departments or 16 weeks. We want to make sure that we're giving the school system and the public what they need in order to respond to kids who are coming to school, first grade, kindergarten, with their own devices, who can master materials and find things just as quickly or more quickly than some of our teachers. Why aren't we training and making sure that education is dynamic, that you're not bored to death in a classroom? I mean, I graduated 3.5 years from undergraduate, and I did that because I was bored to death in a classroom. I didn't want to sit in anybody else's classroom for 16 weeks. Also, I think it's important that we need to look at some of the developmentally where our students are coming from. I have a 6-year-old niece. She reads. She can answer anything that you ask her to. She knows how to find it. And I tell you what, we complain about the one-room schoolhouse, but let me tell you something. Those teachers were off the chain. They were bad, because here's why. They could teach from kindergarten to 8th graders. They were all in the same classroom. They could teach without technology, but I'm sure if they had technology now, they still could do that. What were they doing that we are not? What did they have that we don't have? Personalized. And see, we have to get back to that. We all say that we want to be treated uniquely and people to look at us and respond. We have to figure out how to bring the old back and make it work. And we also have to build our community schools and care for them. And so this is important for us. And now I tell you, in South Carolina, we have businesses that are moving to circumvent colleges of ed, as well as schools, if you're not trying to meet the needs of these parents. More than ever, with all the issues in K-12, I love public schools. I'm a product of public schools. But we have been standardized to the point that we have been standardized to the point of the fact that we can't put the main thing back in the main thing. And it is not about standards much. These kids can rise to the occasion if we give them the kinds of tools they need to be critical thinkers. So this is what we need to be doing as educators, and this is the talk. This is why you're social engineers. You can't allow people to talk about education in vacuums and say, we have a problem in the schools. When a kid brings a gun to school to disrupt learning, it is not a problem of the teachers and principals. It's a problem of society. And that is happening more and more. And so as a society, we have to learn how to reinstitute the accountability to each other. Okay, I'm going to go back to being bored in a little bit for you, okay? There's a major shift in the way we think about our work with faculty. Faculty are used to being providers of the information. They're used to being autonomous, discipline-based, quality-based on how much you have. We have to move that, even in the classroom, to be facilitators, to co-explorers of what we find and what we learn. The difference here is who formulates the questions. We have students who want to be engaged, they want to talk, they want to be active, and we have teachers in college as well as high school who say, no, be still and listen so that you can get what I have, and then we can move on. We're not recognizing that Maybe students are acting up in class because they're bored. Maybe we need to retool in how we give them the context. Maybe we need to make it more relevant to the context of their lives. How many have really gone into the homes of some of our kids in those communities? In South Carolina, it's required that our teacher candidates go to the communities and go to the home and have a home visit. How can you teach someone when you don't understand where they come from? Even as I look in this room, I may see you, but I don't know you, just like you don't know me. And so how can we truly teach if we don't know these kids? And this is the other thing the one-room schoolhouse teacher had. She knew, or he knew, his kids. Again, who defines success? We've allowed the federal government and the state to define success for us. And I always said, if you take a kid where the kids have nothing, they're economically deprived, they come to school and don't know their ABCs, and by the end of the year they're reading and excited about learning, you have a gold star. Versus starting with kids who comes with books and everything else, and they learn, and by the end they can read extra books. The learning isn't that great. So we talk about value added, and we sometimes are against that. But we need to think critically about what we talk about and what we mean when we say we're against things. Also, when it comes to government and policy, as a dean for the College of Education in South Carolina, the Research One University, I don't have the liberty of saying I only want to work with Democrats versus Republicans. When it comes to the children in my state, I will work with anyone to get the resources to make sure that our schools are safe, our schools are places that are focused on community development, and to make sure that we're doing a great job there. So, this is what we have to do, not only in higher education, but in K-12. We have to get people up and engaged. We talk about our kids are not scoring well in math and science. Well, let's think about it. And when I say our kids, I mean our kids. When you begin to compare us on a global scale, we are certainly dropping. Everyone wants to highlight, oh, we're dropping in math and science, et cetera, et cetera. But you never hear people say, but our kids are some of the most innovative and creative on a global scale. The fact of the matter is schools don't know how to take advantage of that innovative and creativity as it relates to math and science. So we need to think about that, and we need to lead the way as educators and stop being so passive. And one of the reasons education is in the place that it's in today is we've been passive. We haven't stood up and said, we're not going to take it anymore. Think about it. If teachers, faculty, those folks stood up to legislators and wrote letters, people would listen. They listened to me. And so the issue here is math has to be applicable. When you talk about music and you start to tap your feet, that's the time to say, you know what? That's math. You're going to 1, 2, 3, 4, all the, there's something to math. And we need to make it contextualized. Yes, we need to make sure they understand it and get the basic material they need to move ahead. I'm not saying one moment that because you're making it applicable and contextualizing it, that it's not rigorous. We need to also get out of that conversation. We start to think, oh, when you open it up and make it fun, then it can't be rigorous. Well, that's hogwash. That's not true. And so you need to prepare yourselves. When you begin to engage and bring others to the table, businesses will say, well, why can't you change that as education? You need to be able to talk about why, the challenges, but then when you finish, you need to ask them, you have pull with the legislators. How about you go with me and speak on my behalf to make a change? It's happening in South Carolina, and I can tell you, if it can happen in South Carolina, it can happen anywhere in our great state. So, and I love South Carolina, by the way. Again, why is this important? Let's go back here. The Kellogg Commission for the New Covenant. Well, first of all, we have students with very diverse needs who are coming from very diverse places. We don't live in the 50s and 60s anymore where we can assume that the experiences of everyone is the same, the learning styles are the same. We have learning disabilities that are tremendous. And so we have to find new ways to help people be engaged for the different materials that we have. Are we creating the kind of teachers to do that? Do we have the kind of teachers in schools now? Are we providing the kind of professional development in schools in order to have that transformation take place? Or are we still stuck in a box with lockstep and passing standards, and therefore you must be able to teach or to lead or to know how to be engaged? I would say the majority of us right now, if you haven't had this experience with engagement, you wouldn't know how to do that effectively. Also, it provides those students with a more practical opportunity to prepare for the real world, and this is where most of our businesses are going to. It also improves retention. Why? Because students are engaged. They're invested in their learning. It increases academic content knowledge, believe it or not. Understand higher order thinking. Most of our students today, I don't know if you guys have seen the YouTube video about Common Core where the young lady sits at the table. It's a cartoon. She sits at the table and the guy asks her, so what are you interested in today? And she goes, well, is it A, B, C, or D? And he goes, what do you mean? She says, well, I need an A, B, C, or D. I don't know how to answer that unless it's A, B, C, or D. And he said, well, but it's an open-ended question. And she says, well, I guess C. And he said, but I haven't given you an A, B, or C, D. She said, well, C is the most likely answer if I don't know it, so I choose C. And so really some students are to the place where they're trying to give you the right answer, that they're afraid to know how to be creative in order to be innovative to solve problems. And I tell you, the problems we're going to have in the future, we're not creating those students today to think about solving tomorrow's problems. We're solving yesterday's problems, and we need to be more forward-thinking. They learn by doing, learn that knowledge has power. Students explore and identify their interest and talent. There's another reason why we do that. But here's essential questions that you need to ask as you begin to be engaged. What, who, and how? What do graduates need to know and be able to do? And how should we measure their readiness? Who can create new learning approaches that prepare many more youth for success? And what kinds of conditions and tools exist? In South Carolina, our superintendent group was charged in working with a couple of legislators, some educators, to come up with what they thought students needed when they graduate. What they said, they want most of our students to be equipped for careers, for colleges, for careers in college, careers out of college, before college, even if you have no college, lifelong learning and civic life in a global, digital, knowledge-based world. Now, why is this important in South Carolina at this time? Because the aerospace industry has begun to come to South Carolina. We have a number of international businesses coming to South Carolina because of our coast, because of the climate, because of where we're located, with many of the major highways coming through South Carolina. 95, 77, 20, and 85 all comes through South Carolina. But what we're finding is we have to increase the knowledge of our graduates. Graduates from high school, if you have the right credentials, they can start out in jobs in South Carolina, 65 and 75,000. That's more than some of our college graduates. So we need to make sure that we're building those kind of graduates to work there. And here you have what the superintendent said. They want them to be creative, critical thinkers, problem solvers, collaborators, capable communicators, and ethical citizens. Also, what we have here is that they agreed with is that the character traits and how we got to measure those, we want them to have grit. In other words, don't give up when it gets hard. You buckle down and make sure you can do it. The other is curiosity. Self-control is a major issue, not only for some of our students, but some of our teachers and faculty and administrators as well. Self-control is a big one. Social intellect, zest, optimism, and gratitude. We have to almost rethink everything about schooling if we're going to move to a model that is going to be applicable for the future. And here you have on the slide the conditions. We've talked about the readiness, design perimeters, essential system elements like curriculum, et cetera, and then other critical elements, change, family, communities. And what you have here in the circle, you have one line showing that it's very difficult to keep the current system going and then institute a totally new transformative system that we've talked about without walls and development. So in South Carolina, what we've done is we've asked schools who would like to participate in total transformation. We've had people to submit, and we wanted to select 5 sites, but we had 31 people apply. We're still going to have 5 sites where we will focus on the total transformation. In other words, remember, working with government, we have to get waivers. We have to look at funding, how do we do this? And then we have to focus on that group, the 5, for total transformation to see if it works. But we're also going to have a group of experts called in the collaboratory. I'm co-chairing that with Jim Reynolds, who was the past Chamber of South Carolina president, Chamber of Commerce president, who's a business person. And so for the first time, the business folk are coming to education because we're credible, and we want to work together. And in the collaboratory, we will have experts working with those sites. Experts, parents, experts, social workers, experts from the police force, from various places to work around the school. So it has to be done in that way, remember, because education is a social construct, right? Okay. We're coming to a close here. Improve the system. These are big ideas. We all want to improve the system, innovate the system we need, clarify, and empower. All of these are important. Some things I want you to just take away here is, we haven't talked much about technology. We take for granted that it's just there. So what role does technology play in all of this? What about funding? We would have to talk about funding at the state level. And when you begin to talk about funding education with districts, you start to step on a lot of people's toes. Why can't we look at funding as it relates to education across higher education and K-12? We're talking about clinical models. We need to, if we're going to have teachers who are ready, we need to have them in the field from the beginning. We need to have principals in the field from the beginning. And guess what? If they're working in the classroom, why can't they get paid? Why can't you get paid as faculty or workers if you're working with a person in the classroom on a daily basis? You're learning. They do this for alternative certification, correct? So why aren't they doing it for colleges of ed? So we have a lot of work to do. And it should be. It helps economically. It helps everybody out in that way. So these are totally transformative issues. But think about when you start talking about funding across P20, K-12, higher education. You're talking about dealing with presidents of universities who will have to think about their budget in a unique way. We're talking about families and districts looking at funding and how you make that work if you're going to have a clinical model. So these are difficult discussions that communities really need to have. Now, one of the things I want to share with you is that I want to make sure that you remember your purpose in life as educators. And I don't believe there's a mistake that we're all here this morning. I think we're all going to get something. And you must understand your roles and how important that is this day in a global society. No more are we isolated communities. No more are you just isolated here in Albany. It's a big world, and we're part of that world. So in order to be the best teacher, the best educational professional, leader, social engineer you must be, you have to remember a couple of things. You have to know who you are and what you're going to stand for. I think that's important. Sometimes we forget that in our work. Knowing your beliefs and your thoughts, honoring your uniqueness is very important, and accepting the personal responsibility for your actions. And this is important because sometimes you're asked to do things that go against what you believe in. And I find that when I put the main thing with love and care and the focus on the student and people that I'm working with, great things happen. And so I don't know if you've heard of the 4 agreements, but I just want to share them with you. There's a book called The 4 Agreements, and it's a great book to read. And there's 4 things that you can take away from that. And the 4 agreements, the first one is be impeccable with your words. Think about it. Every morning when you get up, and you go into whatever clan that you are involved, be it classroom, administration, higher education, your words have power. They have power to inspire, to motivate, to ease, and to generate energy. And I'm very aware of that every day of my life and when I get up. Don't take anything too personal. And what do I mean by this? Because most of the time when people are acting crazy and ugly and nasty, it has nothing to do with you. And you can't take that personally. Even as teachers in a classroom, you know, children have bad days as well. You don't need to write them up time they act up. You need to understand that these are human beings with life conditions as well. And we need to understand that in higher education. Where is the integrity, the forgiveness, the empathy that we need to do our jobs? The other thing is, don't make assumptions. I make absolutely no assumptions anymore. I didn't make an assumption when I came this morning. I thought, well, it could be packed. I could have 3 or 4 people. They could be awake. They could be grouchy. I don't know. But I'm going to give you my best at all times, and that is the 4th one. Always do your best. Regardless if people sit and sleep on you, do your best. Give them your best. Always. And at the end of the day, you will always be grateful for looking at the person looking back at you in the mirror. And if any of you want to get a hold of me, I just want to leave my website. It's www.lemuelwatson.com, Lemuel Watson.com. It is my personal website. And feel free to email me if you have any questions or want more dialogue. And I want to read you a story called The Given Light that I always want you to remember. And it goes like this. It was written by Barbara Hugg, H-U-G. Once upon a time, a man had heard that in a foreign place, far away, there was a holy flame burning. So he got up and left his home to find the holy flame and bring some of the light back to his house. He thought, when I have this light, then I will have happiness and life, and all the people I love will have it too. He traveled far, far away and finally found the holy flame, with which he lit his light. On his way back, he had one worry, that his light would go out. On his way home, he met someone who was freezing and didn't have any fire, who begged him to give him some of his fire. The man with the light hesitated for a moment. Wasn't his light too precious, too holy to give away? For something ordinary like that. Despite these doubts, he decided to give some of his light to the one who was freezing in the darkness. The man continued his journey home, and when he had almost reached his house, a terrible thunderstorm started. He tried to protect his light from the rain and the storm, but at the end, the light went out. To return the long way back to the place where the holy flame was burning was impossible. He wouldn't have had enough strength to go back thus far, but he was strong enough to return to the human being who he helped on his way home. And his light could be lit again if he did that. And so what we're trying to say here in this story is that being impeccable with your words, doing no harm, and remembering to treat others as you would like to be treated goes a long ways, and it comes back in many ways. You're not just teaching students here at Albany. You're not just teaching children in a classroom. One day they grow up, and you never know when you'll have to return to them for a favor. So I always say that I'm teaching my friends, I'm teaching my colleagues, because they will remember you. Just like you raised your hand when I asked, how many of you knew the teachers that loved you and how many of you who didn't? You knew exactly who they were. And it comes around a whole lot quicker than you think. And so my final closing remarks here. I just want you to know that I really do consider myself blessed and kissed by Christ. My life holds so many miracles that I could not thank God enough for them. And I want you to remember that when things get tough and when you want to get depressed about the conditions of life, to remember, I can do all the good. I cannot do all the good the world needs, but the world needs all the good that I can do. And stay in a place of love, because it always brings you back to peace. Thank you so much this morning. Thank you.